The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt.
More reaction from the president tonight on the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey and whom else the Department of Justice is now investigating following the president's executive order on stopping political violence.
97% of all state-maintained roads closed by Helene have been reopened.
Marking 1 year since Hurricane Helene made landfall, tracking devastation across multiple states, a potential tropical storm bears down on the southeast. And then after a long-awaited interest rate cut, how the home market is responding and why some are saying the ongoing crisis is not over.
I think it's a deal that will get the hostages back. It's going to be a deal that will end the war. It's going to be a deal it's going to be peace. I think we have a deal.
Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. President Trump believes a deal is imminent to end the war in Gaza, saying on the South Lawn of the White House today. Now, the terms of any outline are unclear, but President Trump has maintained all along that any deal requires the release of all remaining hostages taken by Hamas. The president of the Palestinian Authority told United Nations Thursday that Hamas must have no role in governing Gaza. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in the United States today, speaking at the United Nations General Assembly. He says Israel must, quote, finish the job with Hamas in Gaza, and claims that's the pathway for peace in the region.
Victory over Hamas will make peace possible with nations throughout the Arab and Muslim world. Our victory would lead to a dramatic extension and expansion of the historic Abraham Accords.
Dozens of delegates from multiple nations walked out of the General Assembly Hall as Netanyahu came up on stage to speak in protest of Israel's campaign in Gaza. And according to White House officials, President Trump is expected to meet with Netanyahu at the White House Monday. It's his fourth visit to the U.S. this year. Two major public figures are now being targeted as President Trump ramps up a pressure campaign against his political opponents. Our team is covering both of these stories tonight. In a moment, we'll get to the new investigation into billionaire Democrat George Soros. But first, former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted over allegations he lied to Congress. Our Matt Galka has the latest.
The president celebrated the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey.
It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. It's about justice. It's also about the fact that you can't let this go on. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it. And Comey was one of the people. He wasn't the biggest, but he's a dirty cop.
Comey was indicted Thursday following pressure from Trump and ahead of a statute of limitations deadline next week. Comey faces 2 counts, making a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, and has said he's innocent.
I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does.
The charges stem from 2020 testimony from Comey. He was asked about older testimony from 2017 when he said he did not authorize any leaks about Russian-related investigations into then-candidates Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Former Comey deputy Andrew McCabe said he was authorized to leak in 2018.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak? And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
Comey's lawyers may argue this is all politically motivated in a trial, but the reputational damage and costs might be good enough for a president who has vowed to go after perceived enemies.
It's an expensive endeavor. DOJ is bringing the full might of the federal government behind this case. It will be an expensive and time-consuming and also very stressful situation for any defendant.
Comey could face a maximum of 5 years in prison if convicted. His arraignment is scheduled for October 9th. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
George Soros has one of the most powerful pocketbooks in politics, backing progressive causes and far-left politicians. The Justice Department is now digging into whether groups funded by him cross the line from activism to extremism. The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, has the story.
Critics have long argued billionaire political donor George Soros' philanthropies take it too far, funding not just activists, but terrorists who wreak havoc on American society. The Justice Department aiming to answer those questions. According to reporting by the New York Times, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's office instructed at least 6 U.S. attorneys to follow the money from George Soros' Open Society foundations to see if they are, in fact, fueling domestic terrorism. Possible charges reportedly include arson, wire fraud, racketeering, and material support for terrorism.
We're going to look into Soros because I think it's a RICO case against him and other people. Because this is more than like protests. This is real agitation. This is riots on the street.
According to the Times, the DOJ partially spurred to action by this report by the conservative Capital Research Center, accusing Open Society foundations of giving $80 million to pro-terror groups involved in the riots of 2020.
We're going to find out. And if they are funding these things, they're going to have some problems because they're agitators and they're anarchists. These are anarchists.
Open Society Foundations has strongly condemned the accusations against them, saying in a statement, their work in the U.S. is solely dedicated to strengthening democracy and upholding constitutional freedoms, adding, our activities are peaceful and lawful. Meanwhile, legal experts caution Trump's continued pressing for prosecutions could actually complicate the cases.
Well, I think we're in new territory here. President Trump seems to be having a really strong arm and thumb on controlling the actions of DOJ. And so that's going to raise challenges from the defense lawyers in these cases that he's overreached his authority and that he's trying to put politics into the Department of Justice.
This comes as the Justice Department is already pursuing other high-profile cases against some of President Trump's top critics, including the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey and a separate probe into New York Attorney General Letitia James. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee have launched an investigation into the ouster of prosecutor Eric Seibert. This comes a week after he resigned as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, the office bringing cases against several of President Trump's political foes, including James Comey. In a letter sent to Attorney General Pam Bondi today, committee Democrats are requesting copies of Seibert's performance evaluations and also any records related to Lindsay Halligan. Halligan was sworn in as the interim U.S. attorney, replacing Seibert in office after President Trump recommended her. The federal crime crackdown of Memphis, Tennessee will begin next week. That's according to Governor Bill Lee. He says the Tennessee National Guard will be deputized by the U.S. Marshals Service and then will assist local law enforcement. Now, none of the National Guard will be armed unless explicitly asked to by local authorities. President Trump announced Memphis as the next stop for the National Guard last week. He has also identified Chicago as a potential target for federal involvement. Now, meanwhile, outside of Chicago, Illinois, federal officers fired pepper balls to break up demonstrations at an ICE facility in Broadview, 12 miles west of the city. That's according to officials. Protesters were attempting to stop ICE vehicles' entrance into that facility. Well, Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss, who was among the protesters, says there was no disturbance and they were fired upon with no provocation. 2 other protesters were arrested this morning. Well, taking a look now at the tropics and the Atlantic Ocean, Hurricane Humberto is rapidly strengthening and could become a major hurricane by tonight or by tomorrow morning. Luckily, the storm is not near land and is expected to turn north, then east, similar to what Gabrielle did last week. And we are also still tracking this tropical wave over the Bahamas. Right now, there is a 90% chance it will become a depression within the next day. Its path into next week is still unclear, but it will certainly bring at least strong winds, rain, and storm surge to southeast states early next week. 1 year ago today, Hurricane Helene made landfall in Florida's Big Bend region as a Category 4 hurricane. The storm causing billions in damage and leaving scars in the Sunshine State that are still visible a year later. Helene then barreled northward, bringing catastrophic flooding and landslides to western North Carolina. Communities braced for it, but they could have never imagined what they'd see on September 27th when the storm tore through the mountains. After all, winds and flooding so severe from a tropical system are rarely seen so far inland. And locals who lived through it say the region survived because neighbors helped their neighbors.
Being able to help any way we could. If somebody called, I never said no.
Churches have pitched in tremendously over the last year. They were the first ones really on the ground here on that Saturday, Sunday.
Hurricane Helene caused at least 250 fatalities in the United States across Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee, making it the deadliest mainland hurricane since Katrina in 2005. Non-citizens will have to meet stricter requirements to get certain commercial driver's licenses under new rules the Transportation Department announced today.
We have a government system designed to keep American families on the road safe, but that system has been compromised. This is a license to operate a massive 80,000-pound truck that's being issued to foreign drivers who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. The process for issuing these licenses is absolutely 100% broken.
Secretary Duffy said an investigation of licensing practices showed several states were breaking existing rules. In Utah, a 10-day public comment period has opened for residents to make their voices heard on which congressional map will be selected by the Utah legislation. Now, these 6 maps you see here on your screen were selected by the redistricting committee yesterday. The first 5 are Republican proposals, while option 6 is the only Democratic proposal. It is likely Democrats could pick up at least 1 seat regardless which one is selected. The committee will vote on October 6th to pick one selection to be approved by the courts. And November 10th is the deadline for a map to be eligible for the 2026 midterms. 911 services in Louisiana, Mississippi, as well as Illinois, are back online today. Thankfully, this is after an outage knocked out access to emergency call centers yesterday in parts of those states. Now, in their investigation into the dropouts, AT&T says a fiber optics cable was cut by a third party who didn't say who. Louisiana officials say there is no indication it was malicious. There are some reports that areas of Alabama also lost service, but Alabama 911 said they had no confirmed outages yesterday. The nearly 4-month search is over for the man accused of killing his 3 daughters in Washington state. Chelan County investigators say the state confirmed human remains and clothing found on Grindstone Mountain are a DNA match to Travis Decker. U.S. Marshals declared him dead on Wednesday, but the sheriff wanted extra testing to be sure.
I know this was an unusual request for the State Patrol. I appreciate them humoring me on this, but we also want to make sure we shut down conspiracy theories. Mr. Decker did not bring anyone else up there and leave the remains behind. This is Mr. Decker's remains. The clothing matches, the remains match. That is the end of the conversation. This is why we asked them to take their time.
The sheriff warns we may never know how or when Decker died, but the coroner is looking into it and could have answers within a few months. Still ahead, the latest in the funding fight as we get closer to the government shutting down. Then a new concerning report on a rise in fentanyl use among employees nationwide. Plus, Nashville residents are on edge as a woman there is charged with impersonating a nurse. The shocking allegations when we come back. The government shutdown showdown continues. In just 4 days, funding for discretionary spending in the U.S. government ends. President Trump and Democratic lawmakers remain at a standstill on how to move forward. President Trump canceled a meeting with Democrats earlier this week, saying their budget demands were not reasonable. Today, he doubled down on that, while Democrats are pointing the finger at Republicans for not talking to anyone.
They also want to have open borders. They want to have men and women's sports. They want to have transgender for everybody. These people are crazy, the Democrats. So if it has to shut down, it'll have to shut down.
4 days away from a government shutdown, and Republicans are on vacation.
The Republican-led House passed a clean continuing resolution to keep the government running, but all Democratic senators but one voted against that measure. In the event of a shutdown, non-essential federal employees could be furloughed. Essential workers like the armed services, the postal service, and transportation employees may be forced to work without pay. And a shutdown will not disrupt Social Security payments. New inflation numbers are in line with economists' expectations. Core inflation, which excludes food and energy, stayed the same from July to August at an annual rate of just under 3%. Now, the overall inflation rate increased slightly from 2.6% to 2.7%. This gives the Federal Reserve some runway as it weighs more interest rate cuts. Americans also spent more in August than they did in July. Consumer spending rose 0.6%, a little higher than many economists had predicted, and that's according to FactSet estimates. Now, this comes as Americans are getting more pessimistic about the economy and worrying about higher prices and jobs, according to a new survey from the University of Michigan. Well, housing continues to be a top source of inflation. Though a recent interest rate cut helps with the cost of borrowing, still, there's no easy fix. The National News Desk, Atra El-Nashar, has a look at where the housing market stands now.
America's housing market is, for too many, simply unattainable.
We are in the middle of a housing crisis.
Activity in the housing sector remains weak.
Earlier this month, ahead of the Federal Reserve kicking off what's expected to be a series of interest rate cuts, the average 30-year fixed-rate mortgage saw the largest weekly drop in the past year. And there was immediate activity. New mortgage and refinance applications skyrocketed.
I think there are some consumers who have been priced out. Buyers are in a better negotiating power.
It was a much-needed dose of relief, but Fed rate cuts and lower mortgage rates overall are not a panacea, as Fed Chair Jerome Powell pointed out.
There's a deeper problem here. There's not a cyclical problem that the Fed can address, and that just is a pretty much nationwide housing shortage.
Supply just hasn't kept up with demand. In August, overall housing starts decreased 8.5% to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of about 1.3 million units, according to government data.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Chairman of the National Association of Home Builders, Buddy Hughes, testifying before Congress this month that costly government regulations are a burden on construction.
It comes right down to it. Again, no matter what the plan is, if consumers can't afford it, what good have we done?
The median price of an existing single-family home stood at over $428,000 in July, according to the National Association of Realtors. To build homes, you need people. And in July, there were 306,000 open construction jobs, up 64,000 from the month before. On top of this, climate change threatens existing homes in parts of the country vulnerable to wildfires, flooding, and hurricanes. Some insurance companies have even stopped covering properties in these high-risk areas. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The woman who was the oldest person in the world before she died last year lived to be 117 because of a combination of lifestyle and genetics. That's according to researchers who analyzed Maria Brañas Moreira's DNA and blood. Well, the U.S.-born Spanish woman enjoyed working and living in the countryside, exercised moderately, didn't drink or smoke. She also ate Mediterranean food with olive oil and 3 servings of yogurt a day. A new report on drug use in the workforce is raising concerns. The study from Quest Diagnosis shows a sharp rise in fentanyl use during random employee drug tests nationwide compared to pre-employment screenings. The National News Desk, Emma Underwood, spoke with someone from Quest about these results.
Quest Diagnostics recently released its 2025 Drug Testing Index, which looks at trends in drug use across the American workforce. For the first time, the report took a deeper look at fentanyl. And what they found shows a major gap between workers who pass a pre-employment test and those who test positive later on.
Random positivity in the general U.S. workforce was 700% higher for fentanyl compared to pre-employment positivity.
Experts say that means many workers may be passing their pre-employment screenings, then later testing positive for the dangerous opioid fentanyl when random tests are given. The report also found marijuana is still the most commonly detected substance in workplace testing. Here in Humboldt County, marijuana has long been part of the culture and economy. However, experts warn there are important considerations when it comes to use on the job.
Marijuana use is getting more societally accepted, which is fine from that standpoint. I think we just need to understand the caveats of what that means from a scientific standpoint in terms of impairment, just like we do with alcohol.
The report shows fentanyl use in the workplace is often combined with other substances, showing 60% of drug tests that came back positive for fentanyl also showed other drugs in the system like marijuana or amphetamines. The report also noted that overall drug positivity slightly declined last year. However, rates are still higher than a decade ago.
Coming up, ancient evidence, what flooding in Texas unearthed from the age of dinosaurs. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Tennessee, where a woman is charged with impersonating a nurse.
Matthew Senn's wife is at Ascension St. Thomas in Midtown.
She had a heart cath done this morning.
He is worried after Marissa Jean Denton is accused of dressing up as a nurse and entering a patient's room last week. Metro Police say she reportedly worked at the hospital until January 2024.
Honestly, it's a little unnerving.
This police report says when the nurse left the room, Benton used a plastic syringe to draw out approximately 4 milliliters of propofol from an active drip attached to the patient. Officers note this could have caused serious medical issues for the patient. Officials say a hospital staff member stopped the act. But Senn tells me he still wants better safety measures. The hospital spokesperson tells us they have upped security and have additional training for staff on access protocols.
Representative Trevor Lee tells me he has filed a bill to rename Harvey Milk Boulevard to Charlie Kirk Boulevard. His post on X has tens of thousands of views. I asked Lee why he's proposing this.
The impact that it's had, specifically because the assassination was here in the state of Utah, puts a lot of symbolism and relevance to our state that I think the vast majority of Utahns would agree with.
I went to Harvey Milk Boulevard today and asked people what they thought. Some who declined to be on camera and some online didn't mind the idea.
I think it's obviously very sad what happened to Charlie Kirk, but I don't think he needs a street named after him, in my opinion.
When July's flood stripped away mud along Sandy Creek, volunteers uncovered a trail of 115-million-year-old dinosaur tracks.
And when we see things like fossil footprints, those are reminders that these are animals that were really alive, were walking around, that were engaging and interacting with the environment.
And new technology helps keep tracks like the ones found in Sandy Creek preserved in place.
And now, these days, we tend to use digital recording. We'll make 3D models, so that allows us to bring it back to the lab and study it in that full natural context without actually having to remove them from the ground.
Coming up, the golfer who President Trump left his security area to greet at the Ryder Cup tournament. We're back in 90 seconds. President Donald Trump and his granddaughter Kai attended day one of the Ryder Cup at the Bethpage Black Course in New York. This golf competition, taking place every other year, pits the best of United States versus European golfers. And the president took a spot up between the first tee and the 18th hole near the bottom of the grandstand. And at one point, President Trump left his glass security area to greet American player Bryson DeChambeau. He also spoke with American captain Keegan Bradley. Well, Jimmy Kimmel Live returns to air on Sinclair ABC affiliates tonight. Kimmel's return comes after discussions between Sinclair, our parent company, and the network ABC. ABC suspended Kimmel's show after his controversial monologue on the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk. It lifted that suspension earlier this week after internal talks with the comedian. And Sinclair preempted Kimmel from programming amid thoughtful discussions with ABC before reaching this agreement for the show to return. That does it for this edition of the National News Desk. I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.